He didn't stretch or warm up. He just stood there barefoot at the edge of the mat in a plain black t-shirt and white jogging pants with no belt. A few teens giggled. One judge looked unhappy. "Is he even a real competitor?" Someone mumbled. But no one, not the crowd, not the reigning champion, and not even the head referee, knew that the quiet guy they were about to belittle had formerly been a tomb guard. And before that, he was in a unit that was so secret that the army won't even talk about it. He didn't come to win. He had come to uphold his word. Before we tell you what he promised, please subscribe to Chain Channel and tell us in the comments sections from where are you watching. If you still think that qualities like honor, courage, and sacrifice are important, help us preserve their memory alive. There was a lot of enthusiasm in the gym. The lofty walls reverberated with shouts. The sound of feet hitting mats mixed with the low hum of families talking and folding chairs. People in white GI uniforms stretched, rehearsed, and paced themselves. While the judges got their scorecards ready, the coaches yelled out instructions. It was the first round of the Eastern Regional Karate Invitational. It looked like just another Saturday morning in North Carolina. No one saw the man who came in late. He walked with his shoulders square and his back straight. He wore a simple black t-shirt tucked into white GI pants. No belt, no patches, and no team colors. He didn't say anything as he walked up to the registration booth. He just handed over a form and a driver's license, which the volunteer scanned without saying anything. Ethan Carter is the name. Adult Men's Advanced is the division. A volunteer told him where to go for the warm-up, but Ethan didn't go with the others. He sat down on a bench near the far wall, away from the crowd, with his hands folded in his lap and his back straight. He didn't observe out of curiosity or worry. He watched with the same quiet attention that a man on guard duty would. A man in his late 50s sat with a companion in the stands across the gym, drinking coffee from a paper cup. He blinked and leaned forward a little when he saw Ethan. He thought, I know that face, that position. A year before, he had gone to Arlington National Cemetery with his family on a trip to Washington, D.C. He recalls standing quietly by the tomb of the nameless soldier and watched a soldier in full dress uniform do his ceremonial guard duty. That soldier had moved with such flawless accuracy for hours that it felt like time had stopped. Not a single stride was wasted, and not a single gaze was off-center. The guard had never flinched, even though it had rained lightly but steadily. Ethan Carter was that soldier. The man wasn't sure until he saw Ethan's eyes, which were focused, quiet, and observant. Not like a boxer eager for a battle, like a protector looking for something to protect. The event went on as usual on the mat. They called out names and displayed scores. Some warriors fought hard, while others just stood still. There were applause, laughing, anger, and pride, but Ethan stayed still the whole time. He didn't do any warm-up, shadow boxing, or stretching. He just sat there and watched silently as match after match went on. Most people thought he was a latecomer, a guy who had forgotten his belt, or a guy who was trying his luck. Some people thought he looked out of place because he was older than most of the other contestants and was so quiet that it was unusual. A few teens whispered and giggled while pointing at the man in the corner, who didn't have a rank on his waist. Ethan, on the other hand, didn't appear to hear. He sat still, like someone who had been standing at attention in the rain for hours, not for applause but because it was his job. No one saw him get up from the bench the first time. When his name was finally called, he walked to the side of the mat. Next up is the men's advanced division match between Ethan Carter and Miguel Ortega. The judge said the name again, this time louder. Ethan came up, bowed a little, and took his place. People started to notice the black shirt, the bare waist, and the lack of anything showy. A person in the crowd laughed. "Looks like we've got another wannabe," one of the other fighters said under his breath. But the man in the stands who had seen Ethan previously didn't laugh. He came down close to his friend and murmured in a low voice that only one person could hear. "That's not a wannabe. That man is a tomb guard. Tomb guards don't just show up anywhere. They show up when it matters. And whatever this is, it matters." Miguel Ortega, the man who stood opposite from Ethan on the mat, was no slouch. He was in his early 30s, quick and sure of himself. He had been a regional finalist 2 years in a row. He bounced softly on his toes and bowed, his one hand already moving. He looked at Ethan's waist and smiled. No warm-up, no school logo, and no belt. He presumably assumed he would win easily. The judge said it was time to start the match. Miguel came in quickly and threw a probing front kick to see how much space there was. Ethan stayed still. He didn't move or say anything. Not yet. He just let the kick go a few inches off center, as if he had already figured out that it wouldn't land. Miguel moved around a little faster now, throwing small jabs to get a reaction. Nothing yet. Ethan's feet stayed on the ground, but they weren't stiff. Then, with a quick movement of his shoulder and a shift to the left, he let a punch go past his ribs without hitting them. No wasted effort, no counterattack, no flair. People in the audience started to pay attention. This time, Miguel used a sharp combo: jab, jab, hook, and front kick. Ethan took a step back, and then turned to the side. Calm, smooth, and measured. Every strike missed by a hair. Miguel lost his balance, and overcommitted, which terminated the match 2 minutes later. Ethan had only moved to the side at the proper time, and let Miguel's own speed take him off the mat. The judge gave the point, and the match was ended. Ethan bowed and went back to his seat. He hadn't launched a single punch. He didn't have to. There were whispers after that. Some people said it was luck, some called it stalling. But a few people, like judges, teachers, and experienced competitors, weren't so eager to write him off. Ethan Carter's movements were not random at all. He moved like a man who had trained in quiet for years to get better at balance, distance, and awareness. He walked like a soldier. The bracket showed the next matchup, Carter versus Tanaka, later that afternoon. Just saying the name transformed the attitude in the room. Kazuo Tanaka was the reigning 3-time winner. He was a national-level contender from Japan who had moved to California to train and instruct. He was swift, strong, and brutal at 28. He wasn't just known for winning. He was known for being the best. His rank was shown by the red belt with black stripes on the edges. His GI had the embroidered crest of a well-known dojo in Tokyo, and as he got on the mat, he bowed with a controlled amount of aggression. Someone in the crowd leaned over and remarked what a lot of people were thinking. That guy's going to wipe the floor with the new guy. Kazuo looked at Ethan, then at the judges, then back at Ethan as the names were called. No belt. He made a short, sharp laugh. He got closer. He pointed to Ethan's black t-shirt and military-style hairdo, and questioned in broken English, "You are Tombguard?" "Yes, I know you. You stand, you watch, you don't fight." Ethan didn't say anything. He bowed, but not very deeply. Kazuo smiled. "I respect soldiers, but standing still is not the same as moving forward." He turned around and jogged to the middle of the mat. The judge told them to start. Someone in the crowd laughed and joked, "This won't take long," as they bowed. A nearby youngster whispered, "That guard guy just got lucky last time." But a few people in the audience had a different look in their eyes. The same man who had seen Ethan at Arlington leaned forward again. He had seen Kazuo fight in the past. He understood how fast and angry the man was. But this stillness before the storm felt different. Ethan moved up to the mat. There was no change in countenance, no twitch of muscle, just stillness, a kind of ready that didn't yell or brag. And when the game started, the air changed. The silence that came after didn't feel like focus. It felt like respect that needed to be earned or questioned, or both. The judge let go of his hand. "Start the match." Kazuo didn't think twice. He rushed in with the crisp accuracy of a boxer who has done this 1,000 times, starting with a high front kick that snapped, and then a back fist and a spinning hook. Everything was done perfectly, quickly, cleanly, and powerfully. Ethan wasn't there, though. The kick cut through the air. The back fist didn't imply anything. Kazuo's heel had already turned around by the time Ethan moved a foot to his right, just enough to clear the way. He hadn't stepped back. He didn't block. He just wasn't where the attack hit. Kazuo frowned and reset. The man didn't just evade. It was how easy it had been. There was no wasted movement and no evident stress, as if he had already seen the move before it was thrown. Kazuo came back, but this time with a different beat, a fast shove to the torso after a low kick. Ethan turned a little, let the thrust go by, and then stepped off center again. Everyone could only hear Kazuo's GI whipping through the air. The crowd, which had been whispering a moment ago, was now quiet. The judge looked at the score. Ethan Carter still hasn't scored any points, made any contact, or shown any signs of hostility. Kazuo's smirk was gone after 3 exchanges. He spread his legs, pretended to take a high shot, and then swung his leg in a wide arc to try to knock Ethan off his feet. Ethan didn't leap. He didn't get ready. He just stepped over the sweep as it went by, turned around and went back to his neutral position. He had his hands down and his eyes serene, as if he were listening to something that no one else could hear. A seasoned martial artist leaned forward from the 3rd row, crossed his arms and muttered softly, "That's not evasion. That's discipline. That's control." Kazuo pushed harder. He started throwing punches not merely to gain points, but to make a statement. But every time Ethan went forward, he did so with the right amount of effort. Not one more step. No counterattacks. No flair. simply moving and being there. It might have looked passive to someone who didn't know what they were doing. It looked scary to anyone who really knew what they were doing in a fight. There is a rhythm to every combatant. Kazuo's advice didn't work for Ethan. He messed it up. Kazuo grumbled under his breath and started to circle because he was upset that no one had answered. He barked something in Japanese that sounded like he was angry and didn't believe it. He wasn't used to running after ghosts. Ethan felt like he was in charge of something that was just out of grasp and out of control. The fifth exchange occurred next. Kazuo made a weak left, then turned it into a flying sidekick with all of his speed, strength, and years of training behind it. It should have touched down. Instead, Ethan leaned back a little, altered his weight, and Kazuo's kick missed by a hair. He hit the ground hard and stumbled a little as Ethan stepped toward him for the first time. He took one step, then another, and suddenly he stopped. He didn't hit, he didn't put his fists up. He just stood there, 5 feet away from the champion, with his hands at his sides and his head slightly bowed. The message was clear. You've thrown everything at me, and I haven't needed to respond yet. People in the stands leaned forward. The phones stopped recording. The judges talked to each other in low voices. A kid pulled on his dad's sleeve and inquired, "Is he winning?" The dad didn't say anything. He didn't know how to do it. Ethan hadn't done anything because he hadn't scored any points or landed any strikes. But nevertheless, it seemed like he was in charge of the whole match. Kazuo's chest rose and fell more heavily now. His forehead was wet with sweat. He walked faster, but his timing was getting worse. He looked at Ethan and then at the judges, and at that moment, he recognized something that scared him more than any opponent ever had. Ethan Carter wasn't trying to win. What was he waiting for? Nobody knew. But whatever it was, it hadn't gotten there yet. Kazuo Tanaka was now sweating. His breathing got faster and shallower. The fluid flow of a seasoned champion had turned into tense, angry movements. He wasn't just wanting to win anymore. He was attempting to catch something, anything. And Ethan Carter still hadn't thrown a single punch. Every time Kazuo struck, Ethan moved just enough, leaning, stepping, turning, always in control and always there. It seemed like he had planned out the whole fight before it started, and was just following the script. To people who weren't trained, it looked like nothing was going on. But for the handful who had spent decades on the mat, this was the highest level of mastery. Control without domination, precision without aggression, and power held in reserve. Kazuo yelled and attacked again, this time with a spinning elbow to knock Ethan off balance. Ethan turned inside the action, and his torso barely touched Kazuo's shoulder. And for the first time, he raised a hand, but not to hit, only to touch. A little tap on Kazuo's ribs that were showing. The kind of touch that didn't hurt or leave a mark, but sent a message. You were open, and I chose not to take advantage. Kazuo jumped back like he had been shocked. It wasn't the touch that scared him, it was the clarity behind it. The way Ethan's body was silent but still communicated. The match wasn't very close. It had never been close. The man across from him wasn't simply calm. He was thinking ahead. Kazuo was starting to grasp that he had gotten himself into something he didn't entirely understand. You make fun of me, he said beneath his breath, his fists clenched. Ethan didn't say anything. He stayed still. His eyes stayed steady, not furious, not frigid, simply clear. Kazuo yelled and dropped his stance, then charged forward to take him down. He moved his weight down and used his judo skills to drive in at the hips, hoping to get Ethan on the ground where his strength may finally make a difference. But that was the wrong thing to do. Ethan didn't fight back. He stepped into the pressure, rotated his shoulders, and changed Kazuo's momentum by shifting his weight slightly. It wasn't a throw. It wasn't even a clean sweep. It was something more basic, redirection. Kazuo's feet got all mixed up under him. His upper body got out of line, and before he could fix it, he was sliding forward, fast, face first. He hit the mat with a loud bang. The room gasped. Everyone stayed still. No one said anything. The quiet was electric. Kazuo lay still for a moment, not hurt, but shocked. His chest rose and fell as he pushed against the mat with his arms. He sat up slowly and looked about, as if he were trying to figure out what had just happened. The judge thought for a moment before signaling the conclusion of the contest. Ethan stood where he had been the whole time, still calm. He didn't yell. He didn't have a party. He hadn't even gotten sweaty. Kazuo looked up at him and breathed heavily. How? He asked. Now his voice wasn't angry. It was different. Respect? Maybe even awe. Ethan held out his hand. Kazuo stared at it, and then snatched it. The crowd didn't cheer. They didn't clap. They only looked. There was something about the occasion that made everybody quiet. Kazuo bowed for the first time in his career, not merely out of politeness, but also out of humility. He didn't lose to force or speed, he lost to something deeper, mastery without ego and strength without noise. People eventually started to move when the two men stepped off the mat side by side. People started talking again, but this time it was quieter and more measured, like when you know you've witnessed something special. Ethan went back to his bench, sat down the same way he had previously, and crossed his fingers in his lap. A man with a clipboard came up to me. He was the tournament coordinator. He said that was unexpected, and he sounded shaken. You could make it to the finals, and maybe even win the title. We'd like to talk to you after the game, and maybe take some pictures. Ethan shook his head once. I didn't come for that. The man blinked. Ethan glanced out over the gym, over the flags and rows of chairs, and then eventually murmured, to keep a promise. That was all he said. Ethan Carter sat calmly near the edge of the mat, long after the last match was over. The trophies were given out, and most of the people in the crowd had left for the parking lot. The coordinator came back again, this time with a small gold trophy in one hand and a medal in the other. He spoke more softly now, with respect. You didn't stay for the ceremony. You won, Mr. Carter. The judges unanimously awarded the final to you by forfeit. Tanaka withdrew after your match, said he had nothing left to prove. Ethan looked at the man. His eyes were calm and steady. I don't need a trophy. The coordinator thought for a moment before putting the things on the bench next to him. Please let us take a picture. It's a tradition. Ethan's voice was low. I came here for a reason, not because it was tradition. There was a break. Then the man asked the question that no one else had the guts to ask. Why did you fight? Ethan didn't answer right away. His fingers curled slightly, almost invisibly, as if he were holding something that wasn't there, like a rifle or a folded flag. Finally he said something. There was a boy I served with who was young, smart and tough when he needed to be, but always polite. After his service, he wanted to be a martial artist, and talked about opening a dojo back home in Utah. He taught me kata in the desert when we weren't on duty. Ethan stopped. He didn't come home. The voice of the coordinator got softer. I'm sorry. Ethan nodded once. I told him that if I ever got out, I would do one match. Just one. Not to win, not to fight, but to honor what he believed in. That strength doesn't always mean violence, that being quiet doesn't mean weakness, and that being underestimated is a kind of freedom. The man stayed there for a little longer, then stepped back and left him alone. Mark Reynolds, the same man who had seen Ethan in Arlington, was watching everything happen near the bleachers. He had stayed longer than everyone else. The man at the edge of the mat was so still that it made him feel like this day wasn't over yet. In his years he had seen a lot, tours abroad, friends who had died, and too many decent men who had died too soon. But what he saw today stuck with him more than most wars. Not because of the battle, but because Ethan Carter won so easily. He didn't move with pride or want attention. He just moved with purpose, presence, and perfection. Mark wrote down what he had witnessed that night. He forwarded it to a few local news sites and a few veterans forums. It didn't catch on. There were no popular hashtags, simply a modest story that only a few people would comprehend. A story that doesn't need a lot of people to be important. A few weeks later, the dojo in Utah where the young soldier had trained hosted a little lecture in his memory. There was no advertising or large campaign, just children, teachers, and an American flag folded up next to the mat. No one knew who had arranged for the special belt with two names, one on each end, to be made. But they reported that the man who brought it stayed at the back of the room for a long time with his hands behind his back and never spoke or interrupted. And as he eventually turned to leave, he stopped for a moment to gaze at the mat. After that, he was gone. He didn't leave behind a medal, an autograph, or anything else, and those who knew, knew. Not every warrior needs a place to fight. Some people just need to be remembered. And some, like Ethan Carter, kept vigil even after the mission was over.